I welcome back to the channel. In your hand, this small silver coin could be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars in today. Market values. The Australian florin isn't just money, it's pure history. War, royalty, silver scarcity, all packed into one coin collectors are desperate to own. Let's moving on. First up, 1940, Australia, 1 florin, 2 shillings. Imagine holding a piece of history, minted right at the dawn of a world in turmoil. The year is 1940, and Australia has just entered the Second World War. In your hand rests a glimmering silver coin, the 1940 Australian 1 florin, also known as the 2 shillings. This is not just a coin, it's a portal into the nation's resilience, its heritage, and its role on the global stage. During one of the most challenging chapters of the 20th century, the florin, a denomination introduced in Australia back in 1910, when the country struck its very first national silver coins, was an important piece of currency. Equivalent to 24 pence or 1/10 of a pound, the florin represented a significant value in the pockets of everyday Australians. And by 1940, the purchasing power of this coin could buy far more than what we imagine today. A coin like this could cover a hearty meal, a ticket to the cinema, or even make a difference in the rationed and uncertain economy of wartime Australia. On the obverse side, you see the dignified portrait of King George VI, facing left, designed by the talented engraver Thomas Humphrey Paget. His stoic image became iconic during these years, symbolizing continuity and stability as Britain and its dominions, including Australia, braced against the global conflict. Around the portrait, the inscription reads Georgivesi, Digibr Om Rex Fd Indiemp, an abbreviation of the Latin titles declaring him King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, and Emperor of India. At a time when empire unity was essential, this inscription carried real weight. Turn the coin over to the reverse, and you encounter one of Australia's most beloved and enduring designs, the national coat of arms, beautifully detailed, crafted by George Kruger Gray. At its heart lies a shield divided into 6 segments, each carrying symbols of the 6 states of the Commonwealth of Australia. To the left stands the sturdy kangaroo, to the right the proud emu, animals chosen, precisely because they could not walk backward, representing progress and determination. Above the shield sits the 7-pointed Commonwealth star, each point symbolizing unity among the states and the federal government. Beneath them, a flowing scroll boldly states, Australia, while just below sits the denomination florin, followed by the date, 1940. It's a perfect marriage of artistry and national identity, pressed into 1131, grams of 92.5% sterling silver. But what makes the Años Patricios Florin truly compelling is the historical moment it represents. Australia had declared war on Germany in 1939, and by 1940, Australian troops were already serving overseas. The coin circulated among civilians at home and servicemen preparing to defend their nation. Imagine these coins changing hands at railway stations as soldiers boarded trains, in pubs where friends toasted to uncertain futures, and in shops where mothers carefully counted coins to buy food amidst growing wartime shortages. Each florin became a silent witness to stories of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. In terms of mintage, the 1940 florin was struck in Melbourne with a production figure of around 6.6 million pieces. While that may sound like a large number, surviving examples in high grade, especially in mint state condition, are far scarcer. Collectors treasure well-preserved coins with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, while coins with signs of heavy circulation still carry immense historical charm. For serious numismatists, owning a 1940 florin is like holding a tangible piece of wartime Australia. Today, the value of the 1940 Australian florin depends greatly on its condition. Circulated pieces are accessible to beginner collectors, often worth tens of dollars, but in uncirculated grades, The coin can fetch hundreds, sometimes significantly more, if accompanied by original brilliance or rare varieties. Beyond the silver content, its true value lies in the story it carries. A coin that lived through the earliest days of Australia's involvement in a global conflict that would reshape the world. When you place the 1940 florin in your hand, you're not just admiring a numismatic treasure, you're connecting with the everyday lives of Australians who endured one of the most uncertain times in modern history. Every scratch, every worn edge, every glint of silver reflects the hands that once held it, and the world in which it circulated. That is the magic of this remarkable coin. Next up, 1941 Australia 1 florin, 2 shillings. Now let us step forward 1 year to 1941, a pivotal and even more intense moment in Australia's wartime journey. The 1941 Australian 1 florin, or 2 shillings, is another masterpiece of silver coinage, embodying not just monetary value, but national identity during the darkest hours of World War II. In 1941, Australia faced extraordinary challenges. The war in Europe was intensifying, and the threat of Japanese expansion in the Pacific loomed ominously. On the home front, rationing tightened, families worried about loved ones overseas, and the government mobilized resources to prepare for what was becoming a truly global war. Amid this backdrop, every day, Australians continued to use coins, like the florin in their daily lives, symbols of stability in an unstable world. This coin, struck once again in sterling silver, weighs 11.31 grams with a diameter of 28.5 millimeters and shines with the same classical artistry that made the series iconic. On its obverse rests the familiar left-facing portrait of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His calm, unwavering profile offered reassurance, a reminder that across the vast expanse of the empire, unity and resilience would prevail. The surrounding inscription reaffirmed his titles in Latin, emphasizing Australia's ties to Britain and the Empire, at a time when solidarity was vital for survival. Flip the coin to its reverse, and you see once more the resplendent Australian coat of arms designed by George Kruger Gray. The shield, the kangaroo, the emu, the star above, all symbols of the young nation's pride and independence, yet bound firmly to the traditions of the Commonwealth. The artistry is deeply symbolic. The kangaroo and emu's forward stride was more than decorative. It was a metaphor for Australia's determination to press onward, no matter the obstacles. And in 1941, that symbolism resonated profoundly. The year 1941 was not just another date stamped on silver. It was a year of immense transformation for Australia. Australian forces fought bravely in North Africa, in Greece, and in Crete, while the nation anxiously watched the growing dangers in the Pacific. The very next year, Japan would strike at Pearl Harbor and launch its advance through Asia, bringing the war terrifyingly close to Australian shores. In this sense, the 1941 florin is a quiet witness to the last moments before Australia itself would become directly threatened in the Pacific theatre. The mintage for the 1941 florin was larger than the previous year, totaling around 8.6 million coins struck in Melbourne. These were workhorse coins, designed for daily commerce, and most circulated extensively. As a result, high-grade, uncirculated examples are prized by collectors, with brilliant luster and crisp details making them standout treasures. For those interested in silver stacking, the sterling content already provides a base value, but for numismatists, the true allure lies in the coin's historical resonance. Condition plays a critical role in today's market. Worn coins may be affordable, often priced modestly above silver melt value, but specimens in fine or extremely fine condition start commanding premiums. Mint state examples, especially those certified by grading services, can achieve impressive prices, sometimes several $100s, depending on their strike quality and eye appeal. The 1941 florin is not just silver. Its history solidified in metal and collectors know it. Beyond its tangible worth, this coin invites us to reflect on its journey. Imagine the 1941 florin exchanged at a bustling marketplace, used to buy bread, meat, or scarce wartime essentials. Picture it in the pocket of a soldier's family, clinking alongside other coins as they saved every penny to send letters or care packages abroad. Envision it passing hands in moments of joy and sorrow alike. Small tokens of normal life amidst an abnormal era. When you hold the 1941 Australian florin, you feel the pulse of a nation on the edge of transformation. It is not just a relic, it is a storyteller, whispering of resilience, sacrifice, and the everyday courage of ordinary Australians who faced the greatest challenge of their time. For collectors, it offers both the tangible allure of sterling silver and the intangible but priceless connection to history. That's what makes this coin not only a collectible, but a keepsake of national pride and enduring human spirit. Next up, 1942 Australia 1 florin, 2 shillings. The year is 1942. The world is at war, and Australia stands at one of the most pivotal moments in its history. In your hand, a single silver coin, the 1942 Australian florin. The humble 2 shillings tells a story far greater than its face value. It is a story of invasion fears, of national resilience, and of a young nation finding its own identity under the shadow of global conflict. The florin, first minted in 1910, had long been one of the heaviest hitting coins in daily commerce. Worth 1/10 of a pound, its 92.5% silver composition made it not only a trusted medium of exchange, but also a valuable store of wealth. By 1942, inflation and rationing had gripped the nation, yet this coin remained an everyday companion in shops, train stations, and post offices. To many, it was more than silver. It was a lifeline. Look at the obverse of this 1942 florin, and you'll find the calm, steadfast portrait of King George VI. His profile, facing left, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, had become a reassuring presence during wartime. Around him runs the Latin inscription, Jorgiv Sex Digibron Rex FD Ind Imp, declaring him King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, and Emperor of India. To Australians in 1942, this was more than ceremonial. It symbolized their bond with Britain in a fight for survival. Turn the coin over and you're greeted by the iconic coat of arms of Australia, crafted by George Kruger Gray. At its center lies a shield divided into 6 segments, each representing one of Australia's states. To the left stands the kangaroo, to the right the emu, both proud national symbols. Above them rests the Commonwealth Star with its 7 points, a beacon of unity. Below them flows the word Australia across a banner, while beneath that sits the denomination florin, with the date 1942. It's a design of elegance and power, unmistakably Australian, and yet deeply tied to the shared heritage of the British Empire. But beyond the artistry, this coin reflects the intensity of the year. 1942 Australia faced its greatest threat since colonization. With the fall of Singapore in February, Japanese forces swept across the Pacific. Darwin was bombed, towns along the north coast were attacked, and the nation braced for a possible invasion. For the first time, Australians felt war directly on their soil. Every coin, including the florin, became a participant in this tense chapter of history, changing hands in communities under blackout restrictions, in ration shops, and in households listening anxiously to wartime broadcasts on the radio. The 1942 florin is particularly significant to collectors because it was minted in 2 locations, Melbourne, Australia, and San Francisco in the United States, due to the strain on local production during wartime. Coins struck in San Francisco bear a small S mint mark just above the date. This tiny letter is a key detail, transforming the coin from a common issue to a sought-after collectible. The Melbourne minted florins circulated widely, while the San Francisco issues were part of an emergency arrangement between allied nations, a symbol of cooperation and survival. In terms of mintage, millions were produced, but condition is everything. Circulated coins are still found with heavy wear, evidence of their hard-working role during wartime Australia. Yet high-grade examples, especially those with clear mint marks and minimal wear, are scarce and command strong premiums in today's numismatic market. Collectors prize the San Francisco issues particularly as they tell a global story. An Australian coin born on American soil during the darkest hours of World War II. Today, the 1942 florin carries value well beyond its silver content. In average circulated condition, it remains affordable, but mint state examples, especially with that all-important S mint mark, can reach several $100s or more depending on quality. For many collectors, however, the financial worth pales in comparison to the historical resonance. Imagine this coin in 1942, sliding across a shop counter as families bought their rationed sugar or tea, jingling in the pockets of servicemen preparing to board troop ships, or passed between neighbors trading essentials during shortages. Each scratch, each worn edge, is a reminder of resilience, sacrifice, and survival. The 1942 Australian florin is more than a coin. It is a time capsule of a nation at war, a silver witness to Australia's most testing year. Next up, 1943 Australia, 1 florin, 2 shillings. 1 year later in 1943, the story continues. The Australian florin remains in everyday use, but the world, and Australia's place within it, is rapidly changing. The 1943 Australian florin, minted again in both Melbourne and San Francisco, represents not just continuity, but adaptation in the face of global upheaval. Australia in 1943 was a nation transformed by war. With Japanese forces halted at Kokoda the previous year, and Allied successes in the Pacific growing, the immediate threat of invasion eased, yet the war was far from over. Every Australian family was touched by the conflict, whether through loved ones serving abroad, rationing at home, or the constant tension of wartime uncertainty. And amidst this, the florin was there, a silver coin exchanged daily in the markets, the shops, the homes and the pubs, carrying the weight of history in every transaction. On the obverse of the 1943 florin, we again see the profile of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His face is a constant, unchanged from earlier issues. But to Australians in 1943, his image carried even greater significance. Britain had endured the Blitz, and the Empire was still united in defiance. The Latin inscription encircling the portrait reaffirmed the continuity of leadership, a reassuring anchor in uncertain times. The reverse holds the timeless design of the Australian coat of arms by George Kruger Gray, the kangaroo and emu, ever striding forward, symbolized a nation determined to keep moving ahead. The shield in the center bore the symbols of Australia's states, while the Commonwealth star above declared unity. Beneath, the name Australia stretched proudly across the scroll, while florin and the date 1943 declared its identity and era. For Australians, this design was familiar, a touchstone of national pride amidst the turmoil. The fascinating twist of the 1943 florin lies again in its production story. Like the 1942 issue, the coin was minted both domestically in Melbourne and overseas in San Francisco as part of wartime cooperation. The San Francisco issues carry the distinctive S mint mark, a small but significant mark that today excites collectors. These coins are reminders of how global alliances extended even to coinage. A piece of Australian currency born thousands of miles away to ensure the nation's economy kept running smoothly during the war. The mintage numbers of the 1943 florins were substantial, reflecting the heavy use of coinage during wartime economies. Yet survival in pristine condition is rare. Most circulated extensively, developing the expected wear from years of use in the hands of soldiers, families and workers. Those with minimal wear and strong luster are the true treasures of today's collectors, especially those bearing the San Francisco mint mark. In today's market, the 1943 florin ranges from modest prices for heavily circulated examples to significant premiums for uncirculated or near-gem coins. The S mint mark coins command particular attention, as they embody both the numismatic rarity and the wartime partnership between two nations fighting side by side. But to focus solely on price misses the point. The true value of the 1943 florin lies in its story. Picture it exchanged in Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane as families shopped with ration coupons in hand. Imagine it carried by a soldier on leave or by a nurse in a military hospital. Envision it passing hands during small moments of normalcy in an era defined by sacrifice and uncertainty. Each coin carries echoes of courage and endurance, of everyday Australians who lived through extraordinary times. When you hold a 1943 florin today, you hold a piece of silver that once carried groceries home, once rang across the counter of a bustling wartime cafe, once rested in the pockets of Australians determined to see victory. It is a coin that tells of resilience, unity and survival, not just metal, but memory. For collectors and history enthusiasts alike, the 1943 Australian florin is a timeless treasure, a bridge between past and present, and a reminder of the enduring strength of a nation at war. Next up, 1944 Australia 1 florin, 2 shillings. The year is 1944. The Second World War still rages on, but the tide is beginning to turn. Across Europe and the Pacific, Allied forces are pushing forward, reclaiming territory and preparing for final offensives. In Australia, the war has left no family untouched. Rationing continues, soldiers serve abroad, and the nation is bound together in sacrifice and endurance. Amidst these monumental events, the humble florin, the 2 shillings piece, continued its everyday role in Australian life. And in that coin, struck from sterling silver, we find a piece of living history, the 1944 Australian florin. The florin had been part of Australian coinage since 1910, and by 1944, it was deeply familiar to every household. Worth 1/10 of a pound, its silver content, 11.31 grams of 92.5%. Sterling gave it real weight, not just physically but symbolically. At a time when every resource mattered, silver coins like this were a store of trust in the nation's currency, circulating among families who were rationing food, fuel, and clothing while keeping morale high. On the obverse, the coin carries the enduring profile of King George VI, facing left, designed by the talented engraver Thomas Humphrey Paget. His image was by then a symbol of stability across the Commonwealth, and for Australians in wartime, a reminder of unity with Britain. Around his portrait runs the inscription in Latin, Georgius digiber omnerex, F. Dindemp, George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. For a nation still deeply tied to the British Empire, this connection was powerful and personal. Flip the coin to its reverse, and the artistry of George Kruger Gray's design shines through once again. The shield at the center displays the emblems of Australia's 6 states. Flanking it are the kangaroo and the emu, both unmistakable icons of the nation. Above them rests the Commonwealth Star, symbolizing the unity of states and the federal government. Beneath them, the scroll reads Australia, while the denomination florin and the year 1944 declare the coin's identity. This design was not merely decoration, it was a visual expression of a nation determined to move forward even in the darkest of times. What makes the 1944 florin especially interesting is its production story. Like in the years before, Australia could not meet coin demand alone during wartime, so assistance came from abroad. Many of the 1944 florins were struck at the San Francisco Mint in the United States, bearing the distinctive S mint mark above the date. These coins tell a story of international cooperation. An Australian coin produced overseas to keep the nation's economy functioning smoothly while resources were devoted to the war effort. Without such arrangements, shortages of coinage could have caused major disruptions at home. Millions of florins were minted in 1944, but the survival of high-grade examples is far less common. Most circulated heavily, acquiring the scratches, dings, and smoothness of everyday commerce. Imagine these coins sliding across counters in rationed grocery stores, paying for bread, butter and meat, clinking together in pubs as Australians celebrated brief moments of joy, or resting in the pockets of soldiers on leave before returning to the front. Every mark on a circulated 1944 florin is a trace of life lived in a time of global upheaval. For collectors today, the 1944 florin remains a prized addition to any Australian collection. Circulated examples are relatively affordable, but uncirculated pieces, especially those with sharp strikes and brilliant luster, command strong prices. The S mint mark coins are particularly valued, both for their relative scarcity and their symbolic link between Australia and the United States during wartime. The 1944 Australian florin is more than just silver. It is a storyteller, a reminder of resilience and unity. When you hold one, you can almost hear the echoes of wartime radio broadcasts, the rumble of troop trains, and the quiet determination of Australians who knew the war was not yet won, but who believed in victory. It is a coin that embodies a nation's strength in the face of adversity. Next up, 1945. Australia 1, florin 2 shillings. Now we arrive at 1945, a year of triumph, relief and profound change. The war that had consumed the world for 6 long years was finally drawing to a close. For Australians, 1945 was the year when victory became reality. In Europe, the Nazi regime collapsed in May. In the Pacific, after the fierce battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japan surrendered in August, ending the war entirely. Against this backdrop of global victory, Australia's florin, the 2 shillings, carried with it the story of both war's end and the dawn of peace. The 1945 Australian florin is struck, as its predecessors, from 1131 grams of sterling silver. It was a coin of significant value at the time, still worth 1/10 of a pound. For families emerging from years of rationing and hardship, this coin represented more than currency. It was a symbol of continuity, a small but reassuring sign that life could begin to return to normal. On its obverse, the 1945 florin bears the familiar image of King George VI, crafted by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His portrait, dignified and calm, had accompanied Australians through the darkest days of war. By 1945, it was a symbol not only of duty and empire, but also of endurance. The surrounding Latin inscription reaffirmed his titles, a constant reminder of Australia's ties to Britain, though the war years had also strengthened the nation's identity as an independent power in the Pacific. The reverse again features George Kruger Gray's national coat of arms design. The kangaroo and emu, striding ever forward, reflected Australia's spirit of progress. The shield displayed the 6 states. The Commonwealth star above declared unity, and the bold inscription, Australia beneath, tied it all together. Below, the word florin and the date, 1945, stamped this coin as both a functional object and a historical marker. This was the last wartime florin, and it carried the hopes of a new era in its silver shine. Like the previous years, the 1945 florin was minted both in Melbourne and in San Francisco, with the S mint mark identifying the American-struck issues. By this time, the partnership between Australia and the United States was more than practical. It was strategic, forged in the shared struggle of the Pacific War. The coins struck in San Francisco, therefore, are not only numismatic pieces but also tangible reminders of an alliance that reshaped Australia's global relationships forever. Millions of florins were produced in 1945, and most saw heavy circulation. They were used to pay wages, buy food, and mark everyday transactions in a nation, celebrating peace while adjusting to post-war realities. But despite their wide use, high-grade uncirculated examples are scarce, making them especially sought after by collectors. The San Francisco mintmark coins again hold special interest, valued for their history and international story. Today, the 1945 florin stands as both a collectible and a relic of extraordinary times. Circulated pieces remain accessible to most collectors, while uncirculated coins command impressive premiums in the market. But beyond price, their true worth is in what they represent: the closing chapter of the war, the return of peace, and the resilience of a nation that had endured so much. When you hold a 1945 florin, you hold more than silver. You hold a moment in history, a coin that might have bought a newspaper with the headline, "Victory in Europe," or paid for a celebratory pint in a pub when Japan surrendered. It is a coin of transition, from wartime endurance to peacetime renewal. For Australians, it marked the end of one struggle and the beginning of rebuilding, with hope for the future shining as brightly as the silver it was struck from. The 1945 Australian florin is, therefore, not just another piece of currency. It is a monument in miniature, a small but powerful reminder of sacrifice, victory, and the enduring spirit of Australia. Next up, 1946, Australia. 1 florin, 2 shillings. The year is 1946. The guns of the Second World War have finally fallen silent. The world is breathing again, cautiously, nervously, but with hope. In Australia, soldiers return home, families reunite, and the nation looks forward to rebuilding after 6 long years of hardship. In the pockets of Australians that year, a new kind of coin begins to circulate: the 1946 Australian florin, the 2 shillings piece. This coin is historic, not just because of the date it bears, but because of what it represents: change. The 1946 florin was the very first Australian coin to be minted in reduced silver content. From 1910 through 1945, Australia's silver coinage had been struck in sterling silver, 92.5% pure. But beginning in 1946, the composition was lowered to 50% silver, with the balance made up of copper and a trace of nickel. Why? Because after 6 years of total war, the global economy was strained. Silver was expensive, supplies were limited, and governments everywhere were cutting costs. Australia followed Britain's lead in debasing silver coinage, marking the end of the sterling silver era. So the 1946 florin is not just another coin. It is a milestone, the first of its kind, the first step into a new chapter of Australian money. The coin's design remained familiar. On the obverse, you see the portrait of King George VI, created by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His calm, resolute features had been the face of Australia's wartime years, and now they carried into peacetime, a reminder of continuity. Around his image, the Latin inscription Georgiv 6 Digibiar Om Rex Fd Indiemp reaffirmed his role as King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, and Emperor of India. For Australians in 1946, this was a reassuring presence in a world still emerging from chaos. The reverse displays the timeless Australian coat of arms by George Kruger. Grey at the centre, the shield bearing the 6 states. On either side, the kangaroo and the emu, striding forward, representing a nation that never goes backward. Above them shines the Commonwealth Star, with 7 points symbolising the states and the federal government. Beneath them, the bold scroll reading Australia, and below it, the denomination florin, with the date 1946. Though the silver content had changed, the artistry had not. The coin still declared national pride and identity. The mintage for the 1946 florin was substantial, more than 18 million coins, reflecting the strong demand for currency in the post-war economy. Yet despite their numbers, the 1946 florin carries special weight among collectors because it is the very first of the debased series. It marks a turning point. Collectors of Australian Predecimal silver often draw a line at 1945, with everything before considered sterling, silver and everything, after being post-silver or debased. But the 1946 issue sits at the crossroads, both a continuation of tradition and the beginning of change. In today's market, The 1946 florin is widely available in circulated grades, but uncirculated examples are more elusive, as most entered heavy use immediately. Prices range from modest for worn pieces to far higher for mint-state examples, with full brilliance. The true value, however, is not just in silver content or catalogue price, it is in the story. Imagine this coin in 1946, paid to a worker in the booming construction industry as Australia rebuilt, dropped into a till at a milk bar serving post-war customers, used by families buying materials for new homes and new beginnings. Each 1946 florin is a silent witness to Australia's transition from wartime struggle to peacetime growth. The 1946 florin is more than a coin. It is a marker of history, the end of sterling, the start of something new. When you hold one, you hold both continuity and change, tradition and transition. It is, without question, one of the most significant dates in the entire Australian florin series. Next up, 1947 Australia 1 florin, 2 shillings. The following year, 1947, brought a different mood. Australia was no longer just recovering from war, it was beginning to reinvent itself. Immigration programs were launched to bring new workers and families to its shores. Industry expanded, infrastructure projects grew, and the nation's identity was shifting. And in everyday life, one of the coins people carried in their pockets was the 1947 Australian florin. This coin, struck in the same 50% silver standard introduced in 1946, weighs 11.31 grams and measures 28.5 millimeters across. Though debased compared to the sterling issues of earlier years, it was still a substantial and impressive coin, with a gleam of silver and a ring of value that made it one of the cornerstones of daily commerce. On the obverse, once again, is the portrait of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His profile, calm and steady, was now well familiar to Australians. By 1947, his image had become the backdrop of a changing empire, one where India would soon declare independence, where the old world order was giving way to the new. For Australians, the king remained a figure of loyalty and reassurance, even as the nation began to look increasingly toward its own independent future. The reverse still displayed the striking Australian coat of arms by George Kruger Grey. The kangaroo and the emu, moving forward, remained powerful symbols of progress. The shield, divided into 6, reminded everyone of the unity of the states. The Commonwealth star above symbolized federal cohesion. And the bold inscriptions Australia and Florin 1947 grounded the design in both place and time. The mintage of the 1947 florin was far smaller than the previous year, totaling just over 3.1 million pieces. This lower production makes it significantly scarcer than its 1946 counterpart. While not rare in an absolute sense, it is far less common in high grades, and collectors recognize it as one of the scarcer post-war florins. Many circulated heavily, developing the smooth surfaces and soft details typical of coins that saw years of use in bustling post-war markets, workplaces and homes. For collectors today, the 1947 florin is highly desirable, especially in uncirculated condition. Worn examples can be obtained affordably, but mint-state coins with brilliant luster are far scarcer and command strong prices. Its low mintage makes it an essential date for any complete collection of Australian florins, and its historical context gives it even greater depth of meaning. Picture the 1947 florin in its original time. Imagine it exchanged in corner shops where new immigrants shopped for food, bringing with them the flavors of Europe and beyond. Picture it used by young Australians buying tickets for the latest cinema features, enjoying life after years of wartime restraint. Envision it passing through the hands of workers as wages, as industry and housing expanded to accommodate a rapidly growing population. Every 1947 florin was part of a story of change, not just economic but cultural and national. Today, when you hold a 1947 florin, you hold a piece of a nation in transition. The war was over, but its effects lingered. Australia was beginning to transform into a modern, multicultural, forward-looking society. This coin, modest, silver and simple, was there at the start of that journey. The 1947 florin is more than a collectible. It is a touchstone of history, a reminder of how coins can silently witness and embody the great shifts of nations and peoples. For numismatists, it is a key date, a scarcer issue and a rewarding find. For historians, it is a symbol of post-war optimism, migration and growth. And for anyone who holds one, it is a direct link to a time when Australia was reshaping its future, one silver coin at a time. Next up, 1951 Australia, 1 florin, 2 shillings. The year is 1951. A decade has passed since the darkest years of World War II, and Australia is moving confidently into a new era. It is the year of the nation's Golden Jubilee. 50 years since the federation of its states in 1901. Optimism is in the air. Industry is growing. Migration is reshaping the nation, and Australians are carving out their place in the modern world. And in everyday commerce, in the jingling of pockets and the ringing of tills, one coin stands out with both weight and dignity. The 1951 Australian florin, the 2 shillings piece. By this time, the florin had been a familiar companion for over 4 decades. It was still struck to the 50% silver standard introduced in 1946, weighing 11.31 grams with a diameter of 28.5 millimeters. Though its silver content was reduced, compared to the sterling coins of earlier years, it remained one of the largest and most impressive circulating coins of the Predecimal system. For many Australians, the florin was the coin that marked larger transactions, the coin that felt valuable and substantial in the hand. On the obverse, the coin still bore the portrait of King George VI, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His image had been on Australian coins since 1938, and by 1951 it was well known and trusted. The King's profile, facing left, is dignified and calm, carrying the weight of leadership through war and into peace. Around his portrait runs the Latin legend, Georgius VI Dei Gratia Rex Fidei Defensor, translated as George VI by the grace of God, King, Defender of the Faith. Notice something here, the inscription is slightly different than that found on earlier florins. The words Indimp, referring to Emperor of India, had been removed beginning in 1949, after India gained independence in 1947. This subtle change marked a huge shift in global history, reflected even in the small space of a coin. On the reverse, we once again see George Kruger Gray's striking coat of arms design, one of the most beloved in Australian numismatics. The kangaroo on the left, the emu on the right, both symbols of progress, flank the shield that represents the nation's 6 states. Above sits the Commonwealth Star, shining over the design as a symbol of unity, while beneath lies the flowing scroll reading Australia. At the bottom, the denomination florin and the date 1951 stand proudly. This is the classic florin design, elegant, bold, and unmistakably Australian. The 1951 florin had a mintage of more than 12 million pieces, struck at the Melbourne Mint. They entered circulation during a time of prosperity and change. Imagine them being spent in bustling post-war cities, used in the corner milk bars where kids bought ice cream, or exchanged at counters in hardware shops, supplying the housing boom of the 1950s. Each florin played its role in the rhythm of a growing, modernizing economy. Today, the 1951 florin is readily available to collectors in circulated condition, but finding them in true mint state is far less common. Many were heavily used, their surfaces worn smooth by years of handling. Collectors value sharp examples with full detail and luster, and coins in uncirculated grades can fetch significant premiums compared to their silver melt value. Yet beyond price or silver content, the 1951 florin holds its power and story. It is a coin struck at a time when Australia was entering a new chapter, when the scars of war were healing, when migration was transforming cities, and when a young nation was defining its identity not only within the Commonwealth, but also on the world stage. To hold a 1951 florin is to hold a piece of that optimism, a silver link to the hopes and ambitions of post-war Australia. Next up, 1952 Australia, 1 florin, 2 shillings. Step forward 1 year to 1952, and the Australian florin carries with it a quiet but profound sense of closure. This was to be the final year of King George VI's reign. In February 1952 he passed away, and the crown passed to his daughter, the young Elizabeth, who would become Queen Elizabeth II. The 1952 Australian florin, therefore, is not just another coin. It is the last florin to bear the portrait of George VI, the king who had guided Britain and its dominions through war and into peace. The coin itself continues the same. Specifications introduced in 1946, 1131. Grams of 50% silver with a diameter of 28.5 millimeters. Though debased compared to the sterling silver florins of earlier decades, it retained a satisfying heft and ring, making it one of the most handsome coins in circulation. For everyday Australians, the florin was still an essential piece of currency, often used for larger purchases and wages. On its obverse, we once again see the portrait of George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget. His profile, calm and composed, had appeared on Australian coins for nearly 15 years, but in 1952 it took on a special poignancy. This was the king who had rallied the Commonwealth during World War II, whose voice had been heard in wartime broadcasts, and whose leadership had been a symbol of endurance. The Latin inscription surrounding his portrait reads, Georgivis side gratia rex fide defensor, George VI, by the grace of God, King, defender of the faith, gone. As in the 1951 issue, is the reference to Emperor of India, reflecting the post-war changes to the British Empire. The reverse, once again, carries George Kruger Gray's enduring Australian coat of arms design. The kangaroo and emu striding forward still flank the shield of 6 states. Above them, the Commonwealth star. Below them, the nation's name, Australia, and at the base, the word florin and the date 1952. For Australians of the time, this design had become deeply familiar, the face of their national silver coinage. The mintage of the 1952 florin was just over 5 million coins, struck at the Melbourne Mint. While not the lowest in the series, it is considerably scarcer than some of the earlier post-war years. Many of these coins entered heavy circulation, and as a result, high-grade examples are not common today. For collectors, an uncirculated 1952 florin is a true prize, often commanding a significant premium over its silver value. But what sets the 1952 florin apart is not just numbers or condition. It is history. This was the final florin of George VI, a man remembered as a reluctant king who rose to the occasion, steering Britain and the Commonwealth through unprecedented trials. When Australians held a 1952 florin, they were unknowingly holding the end of an era. Within months, new coins would begin to appear bearing the youthful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, ushering in a new age that would last for decades. Imagine the 1952 florin in circulation, used by families, shopping in a post-war boom economy, spent in cinemas where Australians watched the latest, newsreels about the coronation of the new queen, exchanged in workplaces where the prosperity of the 1950s was just beginning to be felt. This coin was there, bridging 2 reigns, marking a moment of transition in both Australian and world history. Today, when collectors handle a 1952 florin, they are not just admiring a piece of silver. They are holding a farewell, the last Australian florin to carry George VI, the king who had become a symbol of resilience and duty. It is a coin that closes one chapter and prepares for the next.